Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of WhiteFlag Warriors Podcast. I'm Johnny McCoy, your host, but I'm also your CEO and co-founder of our app that is in the App Store right now, where you can instantly and anonymously connect with somebody else who's going through the same mental health issues, struggles, and challenges as you. You can find people on there who have just started their healing journey or didn't even know they started their healing journey. You can find people on there like me who have been in recovery for 5 years. I like to hop on there pretty much every day and just check in with myself and my fellow neighbors who are in recovery. We're available in the Apple Store and on Google Play. Leave us a review, follow us, and all that good stuff. But tonight, very excited about our next guest, Christina Kimbrough. She is doing some really, really great work in the addiction field, as she calls it, trailblazing and disrupting what's going on and what the resources are out there right now for addiction. She's got a good sobriety story, and I say good in quotes because unfortunately we all have a story. It's just hers is incredibly relatable. She's done a lot of work with WhiteFlag. She's our marketing manager. Kylie List's one of our favorite people that we work with. And Kylie's just recently named Employee of the Year. So we take what Kylie says seriously. So I just kind of want to start at the beginning. Everybody knows my story. So let's get down to brass tacks on your story. Where does yours begin? I always tell people my story begins before I was born, but Where does your recovery story begin?
I feel that because it kind of does, right? Like when we're in utero, really.
Right.
I mean, I guess so it goes in tandem. So I have what is it? Comorbidity, what they call it, but like mental health and substance use disorder. But I'll take you back to sobriety. I'm a little over 3 years sober. And I got sober during the pandemic, which was wild.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so I'm a military spouse. My husband's in the Navy and we're stationed in Virginia. But my drinking really took off when I met him at age 24. We just, I didn't really drink in high school or college. And then it became problematic and I drank heavily for 10 years. And then one night I just decided to stay out all night. And my husband was at his wit's end and he was like, hey, if you don't get sober, I'm leaving you. And he's the love of my life. We have a great relationship, all the things. And I just, in my active addiction, I didn't realize how much I was hurting the people around me. I think that's pretty common.
Right.
And so I moved home to where I'm from, Cleveland, Ohio. And I went and got sober there. So I did an outpatient at Glen Bay. They were amazing. And I mean, having to pee in a cup in front of someone every morning for outpatient was very humbling for me. But that's how low it got to that point. Cause I was lying and, all the things that come with addiction. So
classic. So I've started to share my, we'll call it rehab story because I got off of, a couple of different drugs and alcohol. What was your first day like? That's what everybody wants to know. What was your trip there like and your first day like?
Great question. So I did outpatient. So it's obviously a little less intense because it is intense. They call it intensive outpatient, but I remember, I don't think I was hungover, luckily, because I had a couple days in between my last drink. And I knew I had to be sober because they were going to do a test. But I remember, honestly, I'm strange. I was excited. I'm an extrovert. So group therapy for me was oh my gosh, I'm ready for this. And also I should preface it, I had done probably 3 IOPs for mental health.
Oh, okay. So you've been in the setting before.
I've been to the psych ward twice.
Okay.
I've done it. I've done the rounds. But I'd never done the substance abuse part because I wasn't ready to, admit that I had struggled with addiction. So my first day, honestly, but what I remember, it was great. I think it was just a feeling of relief.
Yeah.
I'm done. Admit I have a problem and let's just get the help.
Yeah. No, I was really excited.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to die in the facility. That was my hope.
Yeah.
Was that I was going to die in the facility. Like you, I have co-occurring issues, comorbid. At that time, I was deep in my addiction in Xanax. I was on 6 milligrams and trying cases and winning cases. I never lost a case on Xanax, never. And I was drinking about a half a handle of vodka every night or every other night, because the hangover the next day, I could just eat Xanax, which they call liquid beer. So I was pretty excited. And when I got down there, they started patting me down, and I was like, well, I'm here voluntarily. Like, what's going on? And they were like, yeah, but if you're coming off of Xanax, you may have them hidden in you. And I was like, no way. I'm here to just, get off clean and die, or get off clean and get back to my wife like you. My marriage was over, the second that, the second that my wife got to the United States from Brazil, when she realized just how sick I was. And so I went and fought for her first. And that was what I told everybody. I was like, I'm here for my wife and my marriage. And they were like, well, you're gonna have to switch that to being here for yourself first. And eventually I did, but I was, it was the first time I'd ever been in any type of facility. And so, for you to have, gone to a psych ward before, and then IOP. So people don't understand what IOP is. Can you give a little bit of a discussion about that, if you don't mind?
5 of them. So no.
Yeah.
Intensive outpatient. So honestly, it's like school, like, right, for your mental health or whatever you're going through. And it's group therapy. And then you really just, to me, honestly, everyone could benefit from some of them, especially the mental health side. Like,
oh yeah,
you just learn life skills. Like I learned DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, challenging my thoughts, like just a lot of great life skills. So I loved it. I had for years, I thought I wanted to be a therapist. So for me, this was like, I'm already interested in this stuff. Like I listen to podcasts about self-help, psychology. So really being in those for me was like not fun, but interesting. Let's put it that.
Yeah. No, I told you. And, coming out of my treatment facility. So my treatment facility I went to, and it was like, it was PTSD first.
Okay.
We'll deal with your sobriety second, sure, because there's no way you're going to get sober unless we calm down the flames that you're dousing in your brain. And so, and I had no idea what peer support was. Yeah. And I mean, I was 36 years old when I went into treatment, 35 years old. And I had no idea that you just go in this room and the people who are next to you are the ones who are going to do the most help on your journey.
100%. Yeah. I took the peer recovery specialist training out in Virginia. And so I'm working to get hours now to because I just think it's the best way to get sober is connection. And
yeah, exactly. And, that's basically all WhiteFlag, the app, does is we just simplify the process of finding people who are like you, people who are in similar situations, and people who are going to be empathetic, because the reality of the situation is, we've got this computer up here that misfires and people can't figure it out. You can't drill into the head and, operate on somebody's medulla to make them not depressed anymore. So it's all internal. So as I've been on my journey, I've sort of figured that so is the cure. Yeah. The cure is this weird thing that's inside of us that you can't get to, you can't quantify, you can't put an image on, and that's empathy. And, once you sit next to somebody, and whether you're on a bus or in a peer support group or on a podcast, and that person says, yeah, no, I'm from your same city. You go, oh, wow. Now one little teeny brick came down on your wall.
Yes.
What peer support is a ton of bricks being brought down because the person that you're talking to has all these same secrets, not same hometown, not same, hair color, or, oh, you like the Braves? Me too. Like literally, oh, you were molested, yeah. Me too. Or you witnessed a suicide. Me too.
Right.
And it truly is magnetized by 1,000 when the person that you're talking to is talking about stuff that means something to you that you've had to hide and that you're ashamed of.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
It's time for you to talk about, how you are revolutionizing the addiction game, the addiction corner, because it needs disruption, right? Yeah. I mean, the same old stuff is just not going to work.
Well, it's not. We know it's not working.
It's terrible.
Look at, overdoses and alcohol rise, right? So, and I always say so I got sober using AA because that's what was available to me, and I will say it was useful for a year. And then my year marker hit, and I remember my AA sponsor, I posted a picture online because I create content, and she was like, "You're gonna relapse. Like, I see your ego. You know, you didn't mention God." And I was like, "Am I supposed to tag God on Facebook or something?" You know. And so I just started being like, this is not for me. You know, she's like, you're not going to your 5 meetings a week. Like it just, and I grew up evangelical Christian. So it was very dogmatic, very, very fear-based, very fear-based.
Yeah.
If you do this, this will happen. Right.
Lake of Fire is what I was told at 6.
Same. I mean,
yeah, I was raised Baptist, strict Baptist, and my dad was the interpreter of the Bible for us, which wasn't a very good mouthpiece.
Same. I mean, we could probably go off on a million tangents. Yeah, I mean, same. And so it was really, and I deconstructed my faith and walked away from the toxic parts of it. So AA really started to resemble that for me. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let other people tell me, like, especially as women, we're told like not to trust our intuition or listen to ourselves. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm going to trust myself. I got sober. I'm here. I am worth trusting that quiet. So anyway, so I walked away from AA, but then I kind of floundered for a while. I stayed sober, but I was like, I really needed connection. I wanted friends. But I live in a military town, so it's a bunch of drinking. Yeah. And so long story short, I met someone hosted like a sober meetup at a coffee shop, just literally what it sounds like in the meetup app. We went, had coffee. I became friends with this girl, and we realized that there was a gap between AA, rehab, and then just people that are sober, and also not even just in recovery, people that don't drink. So we have a company called Free Life, and we do
Free Life.
Yes, for Free Life LLC. And so we do alcohol-free events all over where we're at in Hampton Roads. But the idea actually is down the road is to create a sober app. So that way we're in the process of getting funding for that. So that way you can create a profile, meet other people who identify just like similar to White Flag, right? And then if you're traveling, you can meet people or find events, because traveling was a big trigger for me, right? Like you can find sober places, sober events, and sober people.
Yeah, no, very cool. Yeah, I still haven't started finding friends. I mean, I'm almost 6 years into recovery now, and I used to be this extrovert, or I guess on Xanax, I was an extrovert, life of the party.
Sure.
I was out every single night, and that was because my demons were inside of my bedroom, and I just didn't want to go home. Sure. And now that I'm, sober, and that I have different interests and different, I guess you would call them caveats, things that I don't do. I have a hard time in big crowds. And that wasn't me before. I used to be at the front stage of Bonnaroo. And I've met like one or two people just casually who have been like, yeah, no, I'm sober as well. And it's like such a difference when you have, people that you feel as though, do I have to tell this person? Like, I always get asked to go out for a drink. Then they listen to the podcast or they find out about White Flag and they're like, hey, maybe we should go get coffee. And I'm like, listen, coffee's worse for me because my anxiety, I start jittering. And so, but connection and finding somebody that you can share, your time with, who understands you, that you don't have to be uncomfortable around, do I have to explain to them that I like to cancel last minute? Because I got PTSD. I cancel last minute all the time, and so I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. And there's definitely a need for it. I think there's a need for sober bars where we're from in South Carolina. There's a big need for sober bars. Have you been to any of those, by the way, or sober nights?
No, I really want to go to one, but we did. So we locally hosted the area's first non-alcoholic networking event, like a business camp.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was very cool, very successful, and we had a lot of NA drinks. And people are just here for it. They're just ready. Because I always say, I'm like, someone told me, they're like, especially I live in the South as well, in Virginia, and they're like, if you don't go to the bars or church, where are you meeting people?
Yeah.
And I was like, that's actually a really good point. And so in our area alone, it's just blown up. We have like 300 people like in a Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just been crazy. And look, it's not revolutionary. People just want to hang out without substances, right? And like you said, they want people that understand. And also, we also have a lot of people who are sober curious or across the spectrum. And so when we say disrupting the space, there's a couple things. Like, I don't say that I'm an alcoholic. I ditch that term. I do not like it. Because here's the thing, I am is powerful. When you say I am something, that is powerful, and you are owning that. I haven't had a drink in over 3 years. I will not wake up every day and say I am something. If it works for other people, cool. So we don't use that kind of language. The other part is that we own our story and we don't have shame around it. So here's the thing. Say you got over cancer, right? Yeah. Okay. We're going to celebrate you. We're going to be so excited. I kicked an addiction. You won't find me being quiet about it.
No, good. That's good.
So anyway, so we celebrate stories and then we aim to kick down stigma, because here's the thing, we all also struggle with stuff. We all do, right? So we're like, let's just cut the shit and just say like we all do. So like put our stuff on the table. And anyway, it's been a beautiful process.
So most people are either born into addiction like me. My grandfather, he died of cirrhosis. My mom should have died of cirrhosis. I've got a handful of aunts and uncles and cousins I've never met. Same story that you could tell through, generations of alcoholics in a family. But I was drinking because of my mental health. How did this all start for you? Like, I heard that you said that you were in psych ward. And I know you want to talk about alcoholism, but this is we love talking about mental health on here as well. So how did your mental health journey start?
Right. So interestingly enough, no one in my family drank, because I came from a really religious family. Like, I've never seen anyone in my family drunk, not once. Alcohol. Anyway, so I was a little outlier there. Very interesting. But I think so. I'm definitely childhood trauma, because who doesn't, right? I think, like you said, it starts where you're born. When you're born.
Yeah. Right. Or in utero before you're born.
Yeah. So I think I have like the perfect combination of like the childhood trauma, and then I'm also like a highly sensitive person and an empath. So I put all of those together, and then I grew up in a really toxic evangelical Christian schools, very strict purity culture, perfectionism, a lot of that stuff. And so you put all that together and you get little anxious Christina.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a story. It's a story that you hear a lot. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
People who are in environments that aren't per se like massively abusive, but they're being told things, and there are situations that keep them locked in anxiety. It becomes what they call complex trauma over time.
Wow.
So and hearing you, what was it? What was your first visit like to the psych ward?
Right. So I graduated high school in 2007, and even back then I feel like we just weren't talking about mental health.
No.
I mean, sure, like, we knew what anxiety was, like depression, like obviously I heard the words, but so I really didn't get help. And looking back, I knew I had panic attacks and like all the signs were there. But fast forward, I think I was like 25, and I had just lost a job. I was dating my now husband, and he was on a deployment. And so like as things happened, life just got complicated, and I started having a panic attack, and it was a bad one. And I thought I was dying because I wasn't, I wasn't educated. I couldn't breathe. And then I dealt with some suicidal ideation afterwards. So I was like, I'd never dealt with stuff like that. So I was like, I know I need psychiatric help. So I admitted myself. I was in Cleveland to a psych ward.
That's great.
Yeah. I went to the emergency room first because of the heart attack, and they're like, "Oh no, I felt like I was having a heart attack." They're like, "Ma'am, you are fine." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I feel like I'm dying." And they're like, "No, you're having a panic attack." And so then I self-admitted to a psych ward. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great that you took that upon yourself. So I used to go to the hospital. I mean, I won't say weekly, but it was bi-weekly, and when you're on Xanax, the consequence of being on Xanax is in between your doses, you start to withdraw. And when you start withdrawing from Xanax, it's extremely, extremely intense anxiety that feels like you're dying. You're convinced that I went to the emergency room every other week. I went to the urologist because, if I peed in the river that was behind my house, I'd be like, I think I'm going to die. There's some bug, and I'd go to the ear, nose, and throat doctor because I'd feel like bumps in my throat all the time. And I thought, for sure, this is lymphoma. For sure, and I went through all of it. I mean, when you go on and you Google the symptoms of a panic attack, it literally says you're dying of cancer. I mean, if you put on there heart racing, can't stand up, shortness of breath, whatever it may be, you're dying of a heart attack or you're dying of cancer. I mean, that's just what the internet the algorithm has been able to teach people, because they want you to go to the hospital just in case. And what it does for people with mental health issues, you go to the hospital and you just feel like a total failure. Right. Like for me, they would be like, listen, have you ever had an anxiety attack? And I'm like, yeah, I'm on all this stuff for anxiety, but let's focus on my heart attack. And they'd be like, yeah, here's a Valium to go on top of your Xanax, go home. And it would be $6,000. And because I was an attorney, I couldn't check myself into any kind of facility. I couldn't get any real treatment or diagnoses, because people say go into the psych wards where you go if you're, you can't function in society. But the reality of the situation is you can't temporarily function in society. It has nothing to do with when you get out. It has nothing to do with what type of person you are or how, reliable you're going to be at work or in the courtroom for your client. I mean, it's literally the same thing as taking 3 days off because you got the flu.
Yes, absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, I'm proud of you though, because I didn't have the courage. I felt like I had a lot of courage because I knew what I was dealing with, but I would have never gone against the stigma like you did. Never. And you killed it.
Oh, thank you. Well, when I got out too, I realized, I remember thinking, so I didn't tell anyone at first. I mean, I told my mom and my grandma, and the people that needed to know. And then I remember thinking, like, if I had been in a car crash, like people would be bringing me flowers, cards. And so, once I started healing, I started using that analogy and speaking out and saying, like, I have no shame about going to the psych ward. Like, I'm a functioning member of society now, like been twice. I needed it both times. And I haven't been in like 4 or 5 years, and by the grace of God, hopefully I'll never have to go again. But if I have to, I know what to do,
no big deal. I'll send you flowers this time, like a car wreck.
Right. I'll definitely, and that's why I really decided to just keep sharing and not shut up about it, because I was like, we talk about normalizing stigma, normalizing this stuff, but I feel like people don't talk about like their psych ward visits. Like, I feel like we talk about anxiety, depression, the pretty stuff, but the psych ward visits aren't as.
I talk about it. That's why you got trapped with me.
Yeah, exactly. You're my kind of people.
Yeah. No, and so it's for people who are listening to this, so you're the first person they've heard, many of them, the first person they've heard talk about their visit to the psych ward. So let's go through it. It's just like going to a hospital, right? You go in, they check you in, it's
exactly like going to a hospital, 100%. And I did not see any of the like, again, I can only speak for my experience, of course, because I'm sure there are other things that happen, but nothing was scary. No white padded walls. Nobody pinned me down. Like it just, I mean, it was hard. I mean, it wasn't like it was like a vacation. It's not a resort. You know what I mean? But,
yeah.
But no. Right. They did a physical evaluation, and then once they figured out I was okay, then I met with a psychiatrist. And for me, that was the first time I'd ever seen a psychiatrist.
That's important. That's an important point, because now the psychiatrist is who prescribes you. For those of you listening, listen, I talk about mental health like people are at ground zero of knowledge. So psychiatrist is who prescribes you medication. Psychologist is who talks you through it. So you met with a psychiatrist for the first time, and most people who need it will never meet with a psychiatrist. So going in and meeting with the psychiatrist is a big step. So what did he have to say, or she?
Yeah, it was a he. I think at first, interestingly, you sounds like, well, you've been on this journey for a long time. So I feel that my first diagnosis was a little bit, I'm not the correct one. So it took a while. They diagnosed me as borderline personality, and
yeah.
But I later, I don't know how niche you want to get. We can get in the weeds on that. But I found out like that's kind of like a bipolar also, where they kind of just slap it.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I was at the place where it took years to find the right diagnosis. And when I finally found it, it was good. But I mean, it really was not a bad first experience. I met some lovely people who were just going through life, right? I mean,
yeah, that's exactly right. Going through life.
Yeah. And so my daily life was literally what you would think in a hospital, except there was group therapy. That's it.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
skills. We went to group therapy like 2 or 3 times a day. Like group is what we would call it. And then, you had downtime in between. I played a lot of cards, colored,
And you get out and you have
yeah,
medication now and you feel better somewhat.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
And so that's what we call inpatient,
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
So that's what we call inpatient. What Christina was talking about earlier is IOP, intensive outpatient. Now, for those of you, because my inbox gets jammed up with people saying, my daughter's sick, my husband, my best friend, what can we do?
Right.
So let's listen to Christina here. She's talked about going to the hospital. She's talked about going to the psychiatric hospital. She's talked about going through intensive outpatient. So these are 3 separate things that you can do, or that you can talk to your significant other about, your loved one about, and they all are there for different, I guess you would call it intensities of your issues. So the hospital is where you go if you have no clue what's going on, you think you're dying. That's most people who have a panic attack. The psychiatric hospital is where you go if you truly feel as though that you can't function at home, in your own dreams, with your significant other or at work, and you just need a break. All right. It's not a big deal to go check in, get your medication looked at or for the first time, talk to somebody for the first time. And then when you leave, you've got some tools, you've got some medication. And then if you still are having issues, you can do what Christina did for her sobriety, which is called intensive outpatient treatment. So awesome hearing from you on all 3 of those things. I never really get to tie them all together, but they're very helpful for different stages of your mental health issues. Now, one thing I want to say here, because it's important, and Christina's been brave enough to talk about it. For most people, they say, I don't want to go and get on medication. That's what they say. That's numero uno. I don't want to go somewhere because they're going to put me on meds. I am alive today because I'm on antipsychotics. Now, I'm also a big shot lawyer that if you Google was on the Today Show, and, I got speeches and people hire me to speak at their businesses and whatnot. I'm on antipsychotics. And the only reason that I am able to do the things that I do is because somebody figured out what medication was needed for the misfiring that was going on in my brain. And I tell everybody, because the very first day that I went to my psychiatric facility, everybody in there whispered to me, don't get on antipsychotics. Whatever you do, don't get on antipsychotics. Because they knew I needed them, and that's what they were going to, but they had a bad experience with them, or they, felt like the stigma. But truly, what you guys have been told, what you guys have heard about the hospitals, about medications, about mental illness is all a lie. I swear it's a lie.
Media they portray it as so terrifying. You know what I mean?
Well, movies is where we get most of our stuff from,
Yeah. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure there are scary moments, and I'm sure, like, I can't speak for every psych ward, but I've been in a psych ward in Ohio and Virginia, and we're very, very similar experiences.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that it's what you make of it. Like, for me, I have Crohn's disease. So I've been to the hospital probably 12 times in the last year, 12 months, once a month. I would say 6 times plus like the recovery, going to get my infusions and stuff. Yeah. And when I go in there, my head gets bad and I start being mean to the nurses and pulling cords out of my arm. I'm so frustrated that I have to go back, and that it's not working, and then I know I can't eat, and then I know they're going to do all these weird tests on me, and I have a really, really bad experience. And I mean, I'm talking worst experience for Crohn's disease than I've ever had for going into the hospital for my head. So it's what you make of it. If you say to yourself, I'm just struggling right now, like me with my stomach, I'm just struggling right now, I need to go park it for a couple of days and then come back refreshed. If you do that with your head, your life will change dramatically. And I'm not talking about your boss getting upset with you, because at WhiteFlag, we have bosses and employers reaching out to us saying, I'm offering mental health days, and my employees, that what can I do to make them more comfortable? So we are going to get to the point where going to the psychiatric ward is not going to be something that they're going to write on the whiteboard at your job and fire you for. We're getting there someday, right, Christina.
Okay, well, let's keep doing it. And that's what I said. Like, that's why I talk about it so openly. Like,
that's good.
And I'm not, what am I, I have nothing to be ashamed of. What am I ashamed of? right?
No, I think it makes you, honestly, I think it makes you more interesting, to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's just because I've been, I've been through some things, and, but everybody has, I didn't even realize that I had a story until my story still evolves. My dad just told me 2 years ago, I think it might've been 18 months ago, that he found his grandfather dead with a gun in his mouth and he shot himself. My great grandfather, my dad told me for the first time 2 years ago. Now, mind you, I'd already had a attempt on my own pain. I attempted to end my own pain, and I witnessed a suicide. I saw the aftermath of somebody who took their lives, and my dad still never mentioned anything to me about it. Think about that.
Yeah.
So we're here on this podcast telling everybody it's totally normal. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
And you know how you say, like, I am an alcoholic, like, I don't like to say that. Mm-hmm. So for me, unfortunately, because where I'm from and because of my background, people look at me as this successful dude, right? I was on the Today Show for the Murdoch case. I was on, Hulu for some documentary. I've won all these cases. I go around and speak. So whatever society calls mentally ill people or people with mental illness or alcoholics or people with whatever they call them, I want them to call me too. Yeah. I want you to look at me and how successful I am and bubbly and happy and all these other things. And I want you to think the worst thing that you could call somebody who has a mental illness, whatever it is, I want you to look at me, and that's what I want you to think of, not the people on the side of the road. Because listen, I've been close to the road, and I understand why people, can't live within their own confines of their own house, their own mind. And I talk about this all the time. And I empathize with, the people who are quote unquote screaming on the street. I understand them.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going right at it, Christina. I appreciate you, you kind of, talking about it, but some other things I wanted to talk about with you. You mentioned that, you are a military spouse, which is, I have abandonment issues and anxiety, which are like nuts. So when my wife goes back to Brazil, I have to go into my therapy, because for some reason, this is just like part of me being alone is difficult. I just really have a hard time being alone. So how do you manage that with your mental health, with your sobriety?
Yeah. Well, don't be a military spouse.
Oh no!
Got back from a 9-month deployment. So.
Oh well, thank him for his service. I mean, I know everybody says that, but
No, I appreciate it. And like on those times, like he's on a ship, so limited call. Like we can't talk. Emails sometimes. Anyway, so long story short, it is very hard. It is. Yeah. It is as hard as you would think it is.
So how do you cope with that?
I mean, to be honest,
I'm gonna make you cry. I'm gonna make you cry right now.
No, I'm good. I mean, he's been home enough. One, he's the love of my life, so it's like one of those, like, what else am I gonna do? Like, this is my person. But I will say, I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I mean, at this time, I share openly. Like, he was gone 9 months, and I was more triggered during those 9 months to drink again. Just.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's a mixture of things. My grandma moved in with me, so she lives with me. So support.
That's great.
It's great. Very, yeah, right. So familial support, all this typical stuff you think. But I'm not gonna lie, it sucked and it's really hard. And I'm glad you asked because the spouses, people don't know. Like people kind of just like we see the outside, but like spouses and family really hold down, and I say are the backbone of the U.S. military. So thank you.
No doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt. Yeah. And, it's interesting. My wife likes to have deep conversations with me late at night because like, that's when my cortisol gets reduced naturally at night, like everybody else's. And in the morning, like I'm just a huge mess, cause my anxiety is really bad after I first wake up. So at night, we'll kind of talk to each other about things. And we were talking the other day, and she said, what do you think is the most effective thing that you've ever witnessed for your mental health, for suffering? And what my answer was? Time. Unfortunately, it's the only thing that I've learned is to just hold on for dear life. And most people, they drink through it, right? That's the reason you drink, to pass the time, to get through that anxiety, to get through those withdrawals, to get through to that point. And a lot of people they don't have the I'm looking forward to this in 9 months when he gets home, right? They don't have, and so time just stops.
Oh, it does.
And yeah.
It definitely does. But it's good that you said that. What I'll add to that is remembering, like, so I'm dealing with some chronic pain issues too now, which is like super fun. Love that.
Yeah.
Get older. And so what I do remember is when I do feel good. So like mindfulness, I know it's cheesy, but like really remembering, like, you're not always having a panic attack. You're not always anxious. You're always in pain. You know what I mean? Like, this too shall pass. As trite sounds, I will add on to what you said. It's good. It's so good. And that's what reminded me, is like, he will come home. The pain will end. It feels like forever, but it's not.
Yeah. So what you got to do is you have to find things to pass the time.
Yeah.
Now, there are two things that you can do. You can do unhealthy things to pass the time, or you can do healthy things to pass the time. And there's no in between, right? So when I'm depressed, I sleep to pass the time, and it works, right? Like you're done, you're 8 hours, you're done, another 12 hours, you made it through a day, and you're just like, I'm just trying to get through to that next point where I feel good again.
Yes.
And what I've learned is that if you fill your time with things that, don't start out as the most pleasant things, like walking or jogging or, finding a genre of music that touches you.
Yes.
Reading. A lot of people hate reading. I understand that totally. I literally can only read like philosophy books. I can't read anything.
Yes.
No stories, nothing. And those are very helpful for your head. Because why? Because they pass the time. Yeah. And so what really happens with people who have anxiety and panic issues is they get locked in the moment and they never think it's going to pass. Never. Yeah. And for me, the moments that I had to live through, coming off of Xanax, and we'll talk about you coming off of alcohol in a second, but coming off of Xanax at the same time I was coming off of alcohol, I experienced the physical pain that I've never heard anybody describe. I know that the physical pain that I endured, I've had kidney stones, I've had Crohn's disease, I've had all of it. I had kidney stones like half the size of a golf ball. There is no pain that will ever come close to what I experienced withdrawing from Xanax. I cannot describe it. Like at the end of Braveheart, where they're literally cleaving him to death and they string him up, all those things, like I would rather go through that a dozen times over than the physical pain I went through. So when I was experiencing it, a veteran who was my roommate at the time, he was the one who told me about this time thing, and you got to pass the time. And so he literally would just drag me around we had to like walk around the rehab facility, and like you say with the mindfulness, I would look at a tree, and just the split second that I looked at the tree, and my mind went right back how much pain I was in. But I finally found a way to, after, hundreds of times of walking around those trees, I finally found a way to focus on it for long enough to where, I didn't feel pain for more than a couple seconds. Yeah. And so that's what most people do. That's why most people are drinking. That's why most people, do heroin. That's why most people do, painkillers, Xanax, whatever they can get their hands on, is because they got to pass that moment, that painful moment that they're in. Yeah. And they get stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so true.
So what was your drink of choice?
Man, probably wine or beer. Just a wine or beer girl, whatever I could get my hands on at first. And then out here, I started going to wine bars. And as I got older, a little classier, as I thought, but
yeah, a little classier.
Culture tells you, whatever. And luckily, like I didn't get to the point where, I say I was addicted. I wasn't chemically dependent. Like I was definitely headed there.
Binge drinking and all that good stuff. Yeah.
All of that. But, but like very, very blessed that I like didn't get to the point where, I was like shaking and without it and stuff. But I was headed there, I knew that was what was next, really, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how does is your husband, is he back now?
He's home. Yep. He's home and he's sober, and it's really cool to be, sober together. And it's an amazing process, but it's like anything, it's a process. So it's reintegration right now. So, he's been gone for a year. So like things change, he changes, I change. And so we're just in a process of figuring out how to live together again, and we're good. Like, we're doing great. I mean, we're a rock solid couple, but it's this life is no joke.
Takes work,
Exactly.
everything that's worth something takes work.
Exactly. Even if
Yeah.
I mean, every marriage, every relationship takes work. You know what I mean? Like, we're no different than anyone else. It's you just got to work on it.
No, I mean, for me, like I've almost lost my wife more times than I can count because I've lost my mind. Literally, I've lost my ability to decipher between paranoia, anxiety, and reality. And, my story is a little bit crazy. It involves, being falsely arrested and them not doing the right thing after a video appeared. And like, you're looking at this video and then you look at their statement that they made after the video, their doctored one. And you're like, I mean, it like literally like they could come at any moment and or say whatever they want. And I just, people would tell me you're being irrational, and I'm going, but they did, they do this stuff. And then I became a civil rights lawyer and I was seeing it every day. And the paranoia and the anxiety and, I would slip in and out of what was real and what wasn't for sure.
Wow.
And, when you've got a spouse who is watching you go in and out of all these different treatments. I mean, I've done everything. Ketamine, I've done CBD or CBT, I've done EMDR, I've done inpatient, I've done, shock waves, alpha waves. I've done all of it, and the one thing that I can say through all of that is peer support and getting on the right medication, whether it be psilocybin or ketamine or antipsychotics. There's no real way out of this thing. You're not gonna fight through it in the night. You're not gonna overcome it like a bellyache. You're not gonna be able to tape it up. The only way out is through talking about it and trying to get on the right chemical regimen, which is medication.
Totally. And I totally second that. I mean, I think like sharing my story online, like in a blog, TikTok, and then Instagram saved my life. And that's why I encourage people to like, I understand that people are all on different journeys and can share what they can, whatever. But I always encourage them, like, if you have the bandwidth and you can, like, share your story because I mean, it's therapeutic.
Yeah. And the greatest part about that is you're not only helping yourself, because you truly are,
absolutely.
You're helping the listener too, big time.
100%.
And I speak now, a lot of my speeches are in the South, the deep South, in South Carolina, where, I'm prescribed marijuana, I'm prescribed psilocybin, I'm prescribed antipsychotic. Where I'm from, you see, officials and spouses of public officials saying marijuana is the worst thing ever. And I didn't start eating through my Xanax recovery until I started consuming marijuana. So I know that, that it's not true and this, that, and the other. But so when I go home to speak, I know that what I'm going to say, especially the way that I say it, and it's something that you just touched on, is going to be received kind of half and half. And here's what I always tell people. If you really want to make an impact, like right now, like some people are like, I really just want to help this whole crisis out. If you really want to make an impact, and I'm talking to the people who wear the tie every day, or go to school, or they're top at their profession, or whatever it is, the best thing that you can do is to share something that you've never shared with the person across from you.
Yeah,
that's it.
So true.
That's it. If you start digging into stuff that you didn't think was relevant or you thought you overcame, that's awesome that you had no issue overcoming this and that and the other. But if you really want to help out the people who are around you and your loved ones, just start openly, without anybody, provoking you, without anybody asking. Just say, there was a time when I thought I was dying, and I called my friend Mark. I would never call a doctor. I called Mark, and he told me, just breathe through it and blah, blah, blah. And just start these types of conversations with the people around you, and see the difference.
Yeah.
See the difference, because there is no greater feeling than when somebody calls you out of the blue and they just, for no reason, and they just start sharing, and you're going, this is a little bit, deeper than I thought. This is a little bit, more secretive than you usually talk to me about. This is a little bit deeper and more meaningful. when they're off the phone and you feel as though this person felt like they could trust me enough with this, there's no greater feeling in the world than getting off the phone with somebody who felt as though you were the person they could confide in. And we should all be striving to be that person.
Yes, I love that. Very well said.
Yeah, well, you're the one who has like the groups out there that 300 people are coming to, and riding each other's,
I think people are just desperate for connection right now.
Yeah.
It's not just sobriety. I mean, yes, but also like, I don't know if you're familiar with Priya Parker's work, but it's like intentional connection, asking better questions. So like we have a course right now, like how to socialize without alcohol, and like how to ask better questions, and like, so what do you do? You know what I mean? Like how to have intentional connection with people that like cuts deep. And it doesn't have to be all about trauma. Like we talk about like fun, lighthearted things too. But I think people are just looking for, deep connection.
Yeah, for me, when I go to NA or AA or whatever meetings, like I'm like I like wait now for people to approach me. But in the beginning, I was Mr. Extrovert, and I would just like run and tell my story. And there's two ways that you feel about it. Like, oh, like I'm showing off or bragging that I overcame something. It's like this weird feeling that you get, like I don't want to be like the center of attention. And then somebody volleys back a story similar to yours, and it's all worth it. I know that it sucks talking about your stuff. I know that even those of us who can talk about it, sometimes you're like, well, did that come off as like, that come off the way I want? And I have anxiety. So I go through everything that I say, but the juice is worth the squeeze in the whole peer support game. I'm telling you, it just is. It's a great feeling when just a random person, a stranger that you never knew, or the person who you're closest to, starts talking to you about things that really matter.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. Seriously, I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, so when's your next like meetings in your area? What if we got some Virginia folks on here?
Yeah.
How do they find your company?
They can find us anywhere free. It's Free Life LLC on Instagram, website, Facebook, Twitter. But we do have a sunrise yoga coming up May 27th. We live by the beach, so we're going to be doing yin yoga, which is just like slow stretching on the beach, and then coffee afterwards. So we do a lot of different stuff like this, like health focused but fun, right? The other thing is like we wanted to make Free Life what the name sounds like, free and happy. Like we don't just like once so that's how the name was born. Is once I got sober, I became free. I became free to be myself. I became free to pursue everything. Anyway, so yeah.
Well, I remember I literally didn't want to or think I needed to stop drinking when I went in to my facility. And Xanax wasn't even on the table for me to come off either. My doctor on my third day, so I went in with a bottle of I think I was prescribed 3 or 4 milligrams, and I was actually taking 6 or 7 milligrams a day.
Yeah.
And so, and that's not because I was having fun and partying. I mean, I needed it to survive. I was on the floor of my friends' houses, like anywhere I could get extra, to get me through the day, to pass the time, to pass that terror.
Right.
And so when I went into the facility, my doctor, Dr. Davies at the Refuge, she told me, we've never had anybody come off of Xanax in our facility, but you could do it. And I was like, well, what happens if I don't? And he's like, oh, you'll be fine. We'll just give you, we'll give you more benzos and you'll leave here the same. And so I had him switch me from Xanax to Valium. And so he asked me, he was like straight, and by my second day there, they were only giving me what was in the bottle, not what I was telling them. And so I was in deep trouble. I was withdrawing. I was seizing. I was, I was in bad shape. And so they switch you over to the equivalent of Valium, so because it's a longer lasting drug and it's easier to quote unquote come off of. And I just started, I had no clue. Nobody told me anything. I just started going 60, 55, 50, 45, all the way down to 0. And it was so painful that I was like, I don't even want to risk the alcohol situation again. But I remember one of my therapist there, a guy named Billy Began, very famous, for his style as a recovering heroin addict. This guy was awesome. And he was like, do you know what being sober means? Do you know what the definition of sobriety is? And I was like, I don't know, man, I'm dying. Right. And he looked at me and he goes, clarity of mind. Yeah. If you have clarity of mind, right. No matter what you got going on, no matter what you're putting in your body, no matter what's going, if you have clarity of mind, you're sober by the definition. And that's what we should all strive for.
I love it.
And so I have intense clarity of mind when I am microdosing mushrooms. Yep. I got clarity of mind from ketamine.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for marijuana, I wouldn't be able to, or I used to not be able to settle down enough to even be able to focus on what was in front of me, right. Eating, sleeping, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so, clearly you have clarity of mind. So I got to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. And honestly, that's part of what we want to do at Free Life too, is like broaden the tent of what recovery looks like, because I think the narrative, I know the narrative is very one way, and there's like,
right.
Get sober, and it doesn't include all the things you just listed. And what we're trying to do is change that narrative, flip it on its head. And what I want people to do is find, first of all, what I recommend is getting to know yourself and what works for you. You know what I mean? Because for me, with what the AA, like, is prescribed to me and it was told, but like, it didn't work for me. It actually did more harm. It triggered a lot of the stuff that I had with the church and stuff. And so it wasn't until I started to get to know, wait, what resonates with my personality, what I need, you know what I mean? And so we always say at Free Life, like, you're unique, so your recovery should be too. Like, it's you have to figure out what works for you, and don't let anyone else tell you what's, so yeah.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that they say about Crohn's disease.
Really?
That the guy next to me is going to be great with Humira, and Humira didn't work for me. These commercials that you see every day. Uh-huh. So I needed Entyvio. These people don't need prednisone, and we have the same disease, literally the same disease, and we're all on different medicine, and we have different regimens, and we have different appetite, we have different everything, and it's the same thing with mental health issues.
That's so good, and it's like, but why do we do that to people that deal with addiction and mental health? Like, we say these are the exact steps that you're, especially talking about alcohol, like, and then NA, like AA and NA dominates the conversation. And I always say, I'm not anti-AA and NA. It saved my life at first. And I'm not, and I will encourage people, if that's what they want to do, like, please go, it serves a purpose, but we need more options. That's all. You know what I mean? Like, and they don't get to define what addiction recovery looks like.
Listen, the reality of the situation is you are incredibly strong and you're in this fight. I'm a strong person. I'm in this fight. Some of the strongest people in the world are in this mental health fight, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're trying to help. Yep. But there's only one thing stronger than the group of the strongest people in the world, and that is the stigma. Yep. And the reason why you've got even now, you'll still have a doctor come out and they'll go, boom, this is exactly what you need to do for recovery. Yep. And it's because the stigma is so strong that we don't even study mental illness and mental health and recovery and addiction and sobriety the correct way, because the stigma is so strong. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, right now, the only people who have really been able to test psilocybin are cancer patients, because we think, well, the worst thing that could happen, these people are, they're struggling, they're dying, but then you read the study. I've read the study, a Harvard study, 2,500 cancer patients. And do you know what happened? Their cancer was not cured. But do you know what happened in that study that they just finalized? I think it was 2 years ago for psilocybin. 92% or something close to that had no fear of dying.
Wow. And what a beautiful gift for those people. What else is there? What else is there?
And these are people who we're supposed to listen to and trust. They have nothing to gain. Yeah. These are just patients. They're writing down. And we're at the beginning. The reason is, Christina, we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning of people throwing rocks at the wall. Then eventually you're going to have a few people there chiseling at it with hammers. Yeah. And then eventually we're going to have a big group of individuals who push that damn thing down, and then we can figure this thing out. But we are at the beginning of the mental health revolution, the very beginning.
Oh, I got chills. So good.
But we're on the way, right?
I think so. We just got to not shut up. That's what I say. I'm like, people can't tell me to shut up. I'm just not going to shut up.
No, and that's why we wanted you on tonight. And,
Thank you.
I think that a lot of our listeners will resonate with you. I mean, a lot of people will see themselves in you. We have a lot of, spouses who spend a lot of time on their own, whether their husband is overseas, whether their wife is working late at night, whether the wife is from Brazil like mine, she has to go home. It is the loneliness aspect. When we learn that we're all alone together, it just makes it much easier to get through it. And so, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and, just a little bit of it. We'll have you back on to kind of dig in deeper, I promise. But, we're very, very grateful for you to, partner with us at WhiteFlag. I know that you've, done a couple of different things with our marketing team, and, I can't thank you enough. And, for coming on and telling your truth and being so open about it. You're our first person to openly talk about going through, a psychiatric facility. My facility, they call a PTSD treatment facility, but it's the same thing as a psychiatric hospital. Sure. And, but to hear it from you and for, somebody who's so unapologetic about trying to feel better, people need to hear that. And I think that this episode will resonate with a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the work you do. Y'all are amazing.
Well, keep sharing, and keep connecting. And I hope to make it to beach yoga, with you guys here soon one day.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So again, everybody, thank you for listening. This was Christina Kimbrough. She is an entrepreneur. She's also a peer sports specialist, amongst other things. I'm learning all this as I'm talking to her. And she's a friend and partner with WhiteFlag. And again, WhiteFlag is just a place for you to instantly and anonymously connect with other people who are going through the same mental health issues, addiction issues, and struggles as you are. It's free, it's anonymous, it's in the App Store, it's on Google Play, and there are people just like Christina on there right now, and it's awesome to be able to connect with her in the podcast, and I'm sure I'll see her in the app eventually one of these days. So thank you again, Christina. It was awesome to talk to you, and hopefully we have you back on here soon.
Thank you.